You can get there from here, where the roads are winding, the stories are crazy, and maps don't mean a thing. So grab your boots and saddle up, we are chasing tales untamed. From haunted mines to mountain pines, no two roads are the same. The compass spins, the banjo grins, we ride where legends claim. On the Can't Get There From Here podcast, where truth wears a crooked...
Hello and welcome to another Can't Get There From Here podcast, in which me and a couple of friends rip apart YouTube histories that were written by artificial intelligence. I'm Canny Bellingham, and I'm joined by my brother from another mother, Warren Reed. How you doing, Warren?
I'm doing great. I can say that I dove into the tangle of the holidays with my eyes shut and managed to come out the other side in one piece, so that's good.
I can't wait for that episode of Survivor, Warren. And also joining me is someone who is sure that she said no before the van showed up to collect her, Nikki Maynard. Nikki is a fellow World of Warcraft player, which makes her an expert in everything, I figure. How you doing, Nikki?
Hey kids, I hope everyone had happy holidays and they got what they wanted for Christmas. Hopefully the listeners are ready for some pure and uncut insanity. Candy, is that good enough? I'd like to give proof of life for my horse, please. Is she doing all right?
Yes, but it still refuses to put the lotion on its skin. Anyway, before we begin, I just need to get something off my chest. Before watching these videos, I loved listening and watching science documentaries and lectures. But I'm beginning to think science shouldn't be trusted. After all, the videos we review all seem to illustrate how scientific discovery is just a slippery slope that eventually leads to weird sexual fetishes and sadism. What do you guys think?
You know, I can say that if my science classes in high school had brought in sexual fetishes and sadism, I might have paid better attention.
I honestly don't think science has anything to do with my, never mind, goth guys and muscle men.
Yeah, I get it. Stepmom stuff. Well, thank you guys. I needed that dose of realism. Anyway, Nikki, you want to tell our listeners what video we are reviewing today?
No, stepmom stuff. I'm from Michigan, not Alabama. And today's video is from the Cursed Sanctuary YouTube channel, and it's the Forgotten Asylum, where inbred children were bred again for research.
And Warren, if you were to compare the experience of listening to this video to a food, what food would that be, and what would it be made of?
I think I'd say it's kind of like a chicken omelet. I've often wondered why they never offer chicken as a meat choice in your omelet, but when you think about it, it's kind of weird. Like, how would that basically just be a dish incorporating both mother and child?
An incest omelet.
Moving on, looking at the video image, listeners would be forgiven if they thought this was an episode from Star Trek, the original series, because it seems the two men in lab coats are both holding the same infant, and by whatever twist of genetics, neither one of them was born with a skull, just bald flesh pulled tight over their very wrinkly brains. What were your impressions?
They do look straight out of Star Trek. I don't often pay attention to the visuals on these things, but now that you mention it, they kind of look like Andorians and the Borgs made a baby.
I was thinking it might be past time to check the seal on the break room microwave oven, honestly.
Yeah. And lastly, I need to say, if this were a movie, this would be the first ever Hallmark horror movie. The pacing of it, the story arc, everything about this story screams Hallmark holiday special. I want this to be a movie. I think we should scrounge through our collective washing machines and furniture and see if we could scrape together a few bucks to produce it.
I'm so down for that.
In movie studios, accept SNAP benefits, right?
These days, they'd better.
Yes.
Okay, and with the awkward first impressions out of the way, we are going to take a short break to burn some science books and or get drinks of water. And when we come back, we will review The Forgotten Asylum, where inbred children were bred again for research. Now, my dear, after isolating you for several days, unable to speak or sleep, I will begin carving up your brain. Your ridiculous plan to expose my nefarious deeds was all for naught. What the deuce?
It's over, Doc. In spite of you being many years older than me, much stronger, and having a sidekick with the strength of a super mutant, I'm here to defeat you.
How dare you? But I'm terrified of being near you, so I will step away from the surgical table where I have been my next intended victim, Eleanor, who is fully conscious and aware in spite of being unable to move or even breathe on her own.
You hear that, Doc? I used this set of keys I somehow acquired to free all of your mutant test subjects, and they are coming to tear you limb from limb.
No!
Eleanor? Eleanor, can you hear me? Thank you. You saved us.
What? She didn't do anything other than let me catch her when she'd been able to leave at any moment. She'd entered after entering the cellar and saw the exam tables.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. Or no sense, really, does it?
Not even a little.
Well, I feel kind of stupid now because, well, instead of her getting out here the moment she confirmed her suspicions, she instead became a potential liability.
Exactly.
Do you want to go ahead and cut her up just for old time's sake then?
I'm not really in the mood now.
Well, I'll just go.
Yes, I think you should. And we're back. Now, before we start, I want to genuinely invite our listeners to listen to the video we had listened to for today. I sent a message to our subscribers, all 6 of them, I think, to ask them to listen to this video by Curse Sanctuary because it's genuinely entertaining and unintentionally hilarious. I was falling over laughing before minute 3. You will not regret it. Anyway, our story begins in 1840 Massachusetts. Quote, an asylum that no map dared to mark, unquote.
I didn't even know maps had the option of choosing what was marked on them.
The narrator tells us, quote, what began as whispers among terrified Tadulos would eventually become the most disturbing chapter in American history. One so grotesque that every record was burned, every witness silenced, and every victim erased from existence, unquote. Usually, when one of these videos presents a word that doesn't exist, I am able to use context clues to determine its meaning. This time, I'm stumped.
How about we ask our listeners to take a stab at what exactly terrified Tidulos means?
Yeah, let's crowdsource this meaning.
And in the story cue the townspeople's whispers. Also, the annals of world history are filled with disturbing chapters. The Inquisition, slavery, the Salem witch trials. Are we so confident that this one is truly the most disturbing of them all?
In other words, the AI author is covering whatever it serves as its proverbial ass. Now, in an effort towards due diligence, I did do Google research for any evidence of this asylum in Massachusetts. From several options, such as Clearbook and Baldwinville, Massachusetts, a modern medical facility offering care for addiction and mood disorders, McLean Hospital in Belmont, One of the oldest psychiatric hospitals in the U.S., known for its evolution from asylum to modern treatment center, and the Westboro State Hospital in Westboro, another large historic state hospital that closed, which is often associated with grim conditions. The Danvers State Hospital in Danvers, this large historic Kirkbride design asylum, which closed in 1992, is famous for its Gothic look and inhumane practices, the lobotomies and shock therapies that are actually real, and inspiring H.P. Lovecraft and also the Arkham Asylum. So the AI author was not kidding when it claims that every detail of this video's history has been erased. Well done. It's not there.
I'm envisioning like the end of the Rocky Horror Picture Show when the entire castle is beamed from its foundation back to their home planet. So this could get really interesting.
I was thinking the same thing, expecting a heavily jowled criminologist to stop a spinning globe at any moment.
And okay, right away you get the feeling that the AI author is a permanent resident of an asylum.
By 3 minutes in, I was already cracking up at the assertions in this video and texting both Warren and Nikki about it. The entire town wakes up to a gigantic building which has mysteriously appeared on a mountaintop. And how did the townsfolk react?
Yeah, so they're all huddled around their fires, still whispering like they do about this massive building that just suddenly appeared. I mean, really?
The video claims that nobody in Clearwater remembered seeing it being built. One autumn morning, it simply wasn't there. And by the next spring, it stood complete, as if it had always existed, waiting. It was perched on Raven's Peak, the highest and most isolated hill overlooking their town. I'm picturing Steptoe Butte, which is in Washington State. It's a very prominent hilltop in the eastern part of Washington along the border of Idaho. I'll make sure to have an image inserted in the final edit, dear listeners, so you see the surrounding the hill is miles and miles of rolling wheat fields and what looks like a pimple with just a scattering of trees and a relay station, I believe, at its pinnacle. Imagine the farm folks in the foreground suddenly looking up and seeing a huge stone building appear on top. That would be the experience of the 300, quote, souls, unquote, as the video calls them, who lived in the village of Clearwater.
So at any rate, I think it's probably safe to assume that they didn't get the appropriate permits for building this. Maybe got input from those 300 souls, even though they just whisper their concerns anyway, as they do.
Incidentally, I asked Google how big the city of Clearwater, Massachusetts is, and discovered that those who were responsible for silencing the witnesses had also wiped out that town, for there is no Clearwater, Massachusetts.
Flushed away, it would seem.
But the residents weren't silenced at all, because we hear quite a bit about what they saw and what they heard. Willowbrook, as the asylum was called, was a gigantic stone structure, all sharp angles and dark stones, with dark windows that the villagers said looked like eyes, apparently. Because its windows, too narrow and too many, giving the appearance of a massive insect watching the valley below with 1,000 black eyes.
1,000 windows. Even if those windows were no bigger than a postal envelope, it would be a massive building. The Hawa Mahal in Jaipur, India, has 953 windows on its front-facing side. At ground level, the building is between 60 to 80 feet wide. It is a massive building with 5 floors that rise in a pyramid shape. And I must emphasize that the entire structure is stone. Just the logistics of building a stone structure in wintertime is a gigantic challenge today, requiring controlling the temperatures of the setting cement as it cures. And in the 1840s, it would have been utterly impossible.
I also have to say that I'm glad for the closed captioning, because when I first heard it, my brain thought that they were describing the windows as 1,000 black guys. That would surely be something.
Well, that would probably explain why most likely the entire white population of the town below the mountain would be whispering and freaking out. It was the 1840s, after all, and nothing freaks out a tiny white community than 1,000 people of color standing on a mountain looking at them.
At minute 157, we are introduced to the main antagonist of the story, a Dr. Sebastian Crow. And he might have been even more creepy than the two weirdos featured in the image of the original video.
So arriving in a cart pulled by, quote, two gray mares that look half starved, their ribs visible, unquote. So I think it's safe to say that the old gray mares, they ain't what they used to be.
We're told that, quote, the locals who saw him described a man of perhaps 40 years, tall and unnaturally thin, with hands that seemed too long for his arms and eyes that never quite focused on the person that he was addressing, unquote. So, Lurch from the Addams Family, you rang?
So, those are some pretty astute observations. That they're able to tell what his eyes were and weren't quite focusing on is pretty amazing.
Very true. At minute 242, the narrator slips up and allows his surfer lingo to manifest. Quote, there was something wrong with bro, unquote.
Apparently all he needs are some tasty waves, a cool buzz, and he's fine.
Even the animals seemed creeped out by this guy. When he walked, the dogs would whimper and slink away, and horses would rear and fight against their reins. Even the crows would fall silent when Dr. Crow, quote, crossed their paths, unquote. Could this guy fly?
Well, in all honesty, crows are pretty judgy creatures.
Well,
Yes.
Doc Crow, or Docro, as the narrator suddenly called him for some reason, didn't waste any time trying to integrate into the community. I'd say that was a smart choice. After all, he was about to do some freaky shit at that brand new asylum. So he wouldn't want random townspeople stopping in to bring him fruitcake and other useless housewarming gifts.
And staring at those extra long hands of his.
But he did have a very brief shopping spree at the local general store. And as just the description of his purchase goes on and on, you are left with the impression that he cleaned out the in-store's entire stock.
Brennan, the ginger-bearded owner of the general store, watched as Duckrow purchased an unusual assortment of items: 30 feet of heavy chain, multiple locks of various sizes, 12 large mirrors, hundreds of candles, and stranger still, 20 leather-bound journals, and enough ink to fill them several times over.
So the chains, mirrors, and candles are fine, but journals and ink? Now he's gone too far.
When the storekeeper gave into his curiosity to inquire about what the hell kind of institution Willowbrook might be, Doc Crow gave an answer in his creepiest manner possible. Do either of you or both of you want to take a crack at doing the honors, guys?
Well, I'm thinking back to Rocky Horror Picture Show, like something like the voice of Riff Raff. Dr. Crow turned those unsettling eyes upon him and replied in a voice devoid of warmth, "A place of mercy for those the world has deemed unfit to live among the righteous."
Very nice.
My wonderful Riff Raff impression.
Oh, you're gonna get this. A sanctuary for the afflicted, Mr. Brennan. Surely you understand the Christian duty of caring for the least among us. Let's do the time warp again.
Quote, the words were proper enough, the narrator continues. By the way he said them made Brennan's blood run cold. There was no compassion in that voice, no hint of charitable intent. It was the voice of a man describing livestock, not human beings.
I could mention how that describes perfectly a certain political figure hovering behind a podium at a hastily thrown together press conference, but I won't.
Honestly, it describes every press conference since the current administration started, I think.
Now, guys, if you wish to open a creepy establishment in which you plan to commit heinous and immoral atrocities, would you first act as creepy as humanly possible and decorate your wrought iron fence and gate with inverted crosses and what might appear as demons to anyone with even a modicum of imagination? That would make your institution fly under the radar and not instill any curiosity in the local citizenry, right?
Well, charitably speaking, maybe the blueprints were positioned upside down and the builders didn't notice.
And one of the denizens from the village, an Episcopal priest, ventured to your establishment to inquire whether or not the place might be in need of spiritual intercession, would you make sure that he was greeted by the weirdest person possible who issue vague threats instead of just saying, "No, thank you"?
I'm going to remember this for our next Jehovah's Witness visit.
Oh, yes.
I call them door-to-door faith pushers. Anyway, I wish the video could have given us a visual example of this white-eyed horror, but the verbal description would make Nurse Ratched from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest look like an angel of divine providence. I'll see what I can come up with for an example.
The narrator tells us, quote, "He was about to pull the chain again when he heard the footsteps approaching from inside. Not the normal footsteps of a person walking, but a strange shuffling, dragging sound, as if someone who approached was injured or deformed. The figure then emerged from the asylum's front door and began crossing the barren yard toward him, made Reverend Ashford take an involuntary step backwards. It was a woman, or had been. She wore what might have been a nurse's uniform, but it was stained with substances the Reverend didn't want to identify and hung from her frame in tatters. Her hair was white, despite appearing to be no more than 30, and her face bore scars that formed patterns almost like writing. But it was for her eyes that truly disturbed him. They were completely white, no iris or pupil visible, as someone had taken a white brush of white paint and covered them entirely. Yet she navigated the rocky ground with perfect confidence, never stumbling, and walking directly towards him as if she could see him perfectly well."
Ugh, holy cow. Also, saying it was a woman or had been one sounds kind of bitchy if you ask me.
Now, any reasonable person at this point would not simply ignore everything they'd seen so far and doggedly pursue their goal of spreading faith among the afflicted, an example of which was presenting exactly at that moment on the other side of that closed 15-foot gate, right?
Absolutely. I mean, what would Jesus do?
A reasonable person would respond by offering help, or at a minimal inquiring whether this person was in serious need of medical attention, or clean clothes.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But after being pointedly rebuffed and told to leave, he instead decided to go full Karen and demand to speak with Dr. Crow. To his knowledge, Reverend Michael Ashford was only aware that some sort of institution for the mentally ill had been erected just outside his parish, and maybe he'd be able to pick up a side hack of ministering to the patients. So he was fixated on his original mission and affronted by the possibility that a medical establishment might not be interested in some stranger being allowed to freely bother their patients.
Well, I'm sure all he wanted to do was to check with each and every one of them and ask if they'd heard the word. I mean, that's not too much to ask. Is it? Is it?
Unfortunately for the Reverend, the creepy woman on the other side of the gate reached out and gripped the Reverend's arm and pulled him close so she could force him to stare into those white, pupilless eyes. Anyone want to take a crack at giving this woman a scarier voice than the AI narrator could manage?
Quote, "The children have no souls, Reverend. This is why they were chosen. That is why they are here. Dr. Crow's work cannot be interrupted by superstitious interference. If you value your sanity or your life, you will walk away from this mountain and forget this place exists. There are things being done here that your limited human morality cannot comprehend. Things that must be done now. Go.
Yeah. You know, I'd I'd be curious how he's supposed to forget the place exists when everyone in town can see it sitting right up there on the peak. Yeah, I'm thinking like the doctor really should have built it in a little more inconspicuous setting, don't you think?
At this point in the video, I'm thinking that this would make an awesome horror movie opening. And if this video had not made the claim that it was based on actual events, I'd celebrate it.
However,
However, the video does make this ridiculous claim, and there's a chance that people might actually listen to it and believe what they're listening to actually happened. We're having enough problems with people believing in untrue things, doubting scientific discovery, and just causing mayhem in society at large. Thus, we have to pick apart this video and leave the remains to be scattered and hopefully lost.
gone with the snows of yesteryear.
Well, basic human self-preservation finally kicked in for the Reverend, and he hightailed it off that mountain and back to his residence. After locking himself in his study in order to pray for 3 hours, he summoned up enough courage to pull out his finest parchment and documented the experience with the hope of sending this report to the governor and the Board of Medicine in Boston. However, he stopped writing around midnight. He picked up a cross-shaped letter opener and slit his own throat.
Ew.
Because that's normal. Okay, killing himself wasn't nearly as surprising as the minute detail describing his facial expression, thoughts, and overall mood. I mean, he was alone in a locked room. No one was there to see his face or report these details, right?
Mm-hmm.
Also, around midnight? How could anyone possibly know that? His housekeeper found him the next morning. Forensics, great back in the early 19th century, was not to be had, and it seems to be a stretch that someone who might examine his body would even take a stab at a guess on the time of death. I think AI just implicated itself as the murderer gang.
You know, this is the problem with claiming that a story is true. The reader then expects that details are accurate, which means that they have to have been told to someone or written down or witnessed by someone who doesn't just suddenly die, taking all those details with them to the grave.
Exactly. The unfinished letter the Reverend had written had 3 additional words written at the bottom in handwriting that were definitely not the Reverend's. The 3 words written were, "They have no soul." 3, guys. Count them. Just 3 words. They have no soul. Exactly which one of those words isn't a word?
So I'm thinking let's just have mercy on ourselves and pretend it was written in proper 19th century Elizabethan English. They've no soul.
If the narrator had said it that way, I'd agree, Warren. The official cause of death was ruled suicide, brought on by melancholia. And in spite of the letter detailing the encounter on Raven Hill and the presence of handwriting not belonging to the Reverend on the note, the town collectively said, "Nothing to see here," and just tried to move on.
About minute 17, we're introduced to a protagonist, Eleanor Frost, who is a green-eyed redhead who held a secret, which, if known, would destroy her reputation. Does anyone want to reveal this dark secret?
Being smart.
Yep, being smart. I'm sure this is something she told people frequently. We learned that Eleanor had a younger brother named Thomas, who was born when Eleanor was 12 years old. She knew right away that there was something seriously wrong with her brother from the obvious clues, such as a spine twisted in an unnatural angle, and his legs were folded beneath him in a manner that no doctor's manipulation could straighten. He had an enlarged head, and later on she realized that his mind worked differently than other children's.
So, and he screamed at sounds that no one else could hear, for one.
Eleanor's father had hidden Thomas in the attic and told the others that the child had died in infancy. That'll fix it. Out of sight, out of mind, or something like that.
Well, except I'm curious how he was able to keep him hidden with all that screaming, apparently, that was going on. And also, Eleanor's sneaking food up to him. So, am I to understand that if she hadn't been doing this, the kid would have starved to death? I mean, I'm imagining the dad checking on him regularly, then saying, like, harumph, I thought surely he'd be dead of starvation by now.
When Thomas was 7, Eleanor's father had the child taken away to an institution that promised to study and possibly cure children with such deformities and mental affliction. And 6 months later, Eleanor's father told Eleanor that her brother had died at that institution.
So, Eleanor began subtly investigating Willowbrook. She interviewed a young man and his mother about the incident that had happened one night when Samuel Porter had been returning from visiting his girlfriend, and as he watched and listened to a nearly fully enclosed carriage traveling up the mountain towards the institution. He'd reported that he'd heard children screaming and crying and making animalistic sounds, and since has been too paranoid to go out at night. Poor kid.
Oh, I totally forgot about Samuel Porter. So am I wrong, or was he sneaking out of his house when that happened? So if so, I bet the other reason he didn't tell anyone what he saw is that his parents would beat his ass if they found out he crawled out the window in the middle of the night.
Right? If I remember correctly, it was because he was canoodling with his girlfriend.
But if you remember, Samuel, who was the blacksmith's apprentice, wasn't afraid of what his parents would do. He was afraid of, quote, being caught by his master. And then again, when he came back, he told his master and a bunch of people. And they thought he was just crazy because his girlfriend's wiles and teasing.
Yep, I'd forgotten about that part. Well, Samuel managed to remember, at least in part, the words painted on the carriage. It said either Riverside Transfer or Riverside Transport. I find this weird because normally a business or institution would just put the name of the business or institution on a vehicle and no other information unless it might be an advertisement for products or services. It would be like Amtrak writing Amtrak passenger conveyance on their trains, or Houston County School District bus on their school buses.
That's very insightful, Kenny, but my first reaction was how in the heck he could read the writing when it was the middle of the night, unless that moon was like super full.
Yeah, I also thought about that. And it would seem if there was enough light for him to read, wouldn't that also mean there was enough light for him to also be seen?
Right. Anyway, so Eleanor gets excited when she hears this because Riverside was the institution where she'd been told her brother had died. And from there, we, the listeners, are expected to just know that she traveled to where Riverside had been before it burned to the ground, and she started visiting the elderly folks in that community, bringing them food and medicine and questioning them on what they knew about the Riverside Asylum.
This is very weird. Wouldn't these folks be just a little suspicious of some stranger showing up at their houses and offering food in exchange for information? At least I've been led to believe that she's a stranger in that town. She lived and worked as a school teacher in Clearwater. Unless Riverside was the other creepy institution in that town, I'm confused.
And then part of me is wondering too, like, at what point is she ever really teaching? So she's doing all this other stuff. So she's dragging this big steamer trunk of bread, cheese, and penicillin while bombarding them with questions about a subject that, at least for some of them, might be super triggering.
Yep.
These oldsters didn't know or claimed not to know anything about the Riverside Asylum, but they gave hints. Quote, strange sounds at night, locals who got too close to the place, developing sudden illnesses. A midwife who delivered twins with severe deformities was approached by Dr. Mordecai Crow himself, offering a substantial sum of money to the infants. The mother had refused, horrified. But 3 days later, both twins vanished from their cradle, and the mother went mad with grief, spending the rest of her life in an asylum of a more conventional sort. Unquote.
Or did she go mad thinking about how they really screwed her over? Like, if she'd known they were going to just take them anyway, she could have at least gotten a decent wad of cash out of it.
She refused to sell because she demanded a 2-for-1 deal. Just because they were conjoined didn't mean she couldn't price them independently, you know. I mean, it's not buy one, get one free. You gotta pay for that stuff.
From bothering elderly strangers, Eleanor did take the next logical step and began spying on the Willowbrook institution with a spyglass while standing atop the roof of the schoolhouse in Clearwater where she worked. Sounds very sane and not suspicious at all in my mind.
Look, Ma, there's my teacher up on the roof.
Oh dear, it's that Frost woman again. I'm pulling you out of her school and sending you out in the fields. You're 9 now. You can go to work.
She noticed the, quote, strange white-eyed woman, unquote, patrolling the grounds at precisely 9 o'clock every evening, and her patrol took exactly 17 minutes. She also noticed that there were never any lights in the 1,000 windows. Once at 3 o'clock in the morning, she saw a group of 3 people walk to the far edge of the property and observed them digging. And just before dawn, they returned to the building, no longer carrying the 3 bundles they had earlier.
All this from the schoolhouse rooftop. Even with a spyglass, she must have superhuman vision or something, particularly noting the white-eyed woman in the dark, somehow monitoring the time down to the seconds.
Yeah. Now, Warren, you were and are a school teacher to some degree, and you understand how very taxing the job of educating between 20 and 30 students is during the daylight hours. How difficult would it be for you to spend your night standing on a rooftop, staring at a dark building through a telescope, and then spending your daylight hours trying to speak coherently to 10 and 11-year-olds who would rather be anywhere else? And further, how long would you be able to get away with this before the cops were called on you?
Right, exactly. Plus, back then, they didn't have the option of just putting on a 2-hour movie to keep them occupied while the teacher naps. Since it was pre-movies, it would have to be live theater, and it seems like a lot more work to coordinate than it's worth.
Well, after vomiting over the edge of the roof, she concluded that the building was not a hospital or an asylum. It was an, quote, abattoir. That is what the narrator said, abattoir. I believe she meant abattoir.
Abattoir sounds to me like a disco version of Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head.
Dancing queen, her eyes were white and clean. Don't think you are unseen. Latest hit from Abattoir.
Okay, Eleanor decided she needed to get inside that building and see for herself what kind of horrors were happening. So she decided to wait for a dark and stormy night, which would cover any sounds she made and prevent her from being seen.
You know, with every story we've covered, I'm not sure there have been many nights that aren't dark and stormy, but I digress.
And then the narrator tells us she dressed in her brother's old clothes. Now, hang on. The last time she saw her brother, he was 7 years old. So I know that the narrator told us earlier that she was small and delicate, but he didn't mean that she had achondroplasia. It seems like that should have been mentioned. Or was her brother 5 feet tall at 7 years old?
Maybe she just kind of draped and wrapped them around herself like a sloppy mummy or something. Like the narrator indicates she was simply looking for dark clothes. You mean she had nothing of her own to wear that leaned toward black or gray?
I prefer just to imagine her cramming herself into a 7-year-old's clothes. They didn't have elastic or spandex back then, so the pants would have been far, far too short and gaping open where she couldn't button them, and most likely constricting the blood flow to her lower extremities, but that's fine.
She brought a pencil and paper and a knife she wasn't sure she could use. This is a common trope in movies and books. Do knives need an instruction manual? I mean, pointy end first would be the only needed information. I have never stabbed anyone, but I really doubt that I'd struggle with how it was used. I don't think anyone has ever picked up a knife and said aloud to the people around them, "Is this thing loaded?"
She must be fun at the dinner table, what with the complexities of knives, forks, and spoons.
And she also brought a dark lantern. Why would she bring that? Or was that just the quality of lantern and that lantern's history was dark?
Well, I hope it somehow becomes a light lantern at some point.
Lastly, she brought some laudanum, which is an opium-derived medicine commonly sold at most general stores before the government had the idea of trying to regulate such an addictive substance. She figured she would have time to drink it if she was captured.
Again, what? Supposedly this woman was extremely intelligent and could have taught at any university had she had the misfortune to have been born a man. She seems pretty stupid, just judging by her actions so far. If she were captured, did she think she could tell her assailant, hold on, let me get this glass vial and drink it, and then you can take me.
Right? Plus, I hate to break it to her, but if they were going to be particularly cruel to her, it would likely happen well before the drugs kicked in. I mean, again, maybe she just asked them to hold off a bit until she falls asleep.
I love this next part. Quote, "If children were dying in that place, someone needed to bear witness," unquote. Or notify the authorities. Stop it? Maybe? But no, if kids are being slaughtered, I want to watch, is what I get from that.
I'm waiting for the, okay, I've seen enough moment.
And she believed that someone needed to document the truth. Wait, she is. She's Agent Scully from the X-Files.
Oh,
red hair, blue or green eyes, intelligent but dumb. She has to find the truth and report it even if she doesn't survive to tell anyone. Then, what the fuck would it matter that anyone documented it? I think Eleanor has been listening to too many of these kinds of videos and was under the conviction that anything written down will eventually be read by others, no matter what.
If she only knew that any and all records would likely be hidden away, lost, or burned in a massive fire.
Before she embarked on her mission, she left a letter to the governor on her desk, which detailed everything she knew so far about Willowbrook, because writing to the governor had worked out so well for the Reverend earlier, of course.
Right. Well, and then it said she left it, quote, hidden in her room, so possibly it might never be found. So, yeah, I'm also like, why not just send the letter? Was she planning to throw it away if she made it back alive?
Right?
Yeah. And we are treated to description of her journey up the mountain to Willowbrook. So the store tore at her insanely too small clothes and threatened to blow her off the narrow path. And remember earlier when the carriage pulled by teams of horses were able to travel up to the Institute? Yeah, I do too. So either she completely forgot about that road, or somehow that road became a narrow footpath with a sheer drop on one side. We suddenly are transported to Transylvania and Dracula's castle.
Right. Well, and I remember that with that Reverend too, like it said that he watched the wagons, then later stumbled through some narrow path. So I'm starting to think that those horses and wagons are a lot weirder than the kids that they're supposedly bringing.
And if any listeners assumed that she spent 2 hours stumbling up the slippery, rocky, barely used footpath in order to avoid detection, sorry, but she ruined that by walking directly up to the gates.
Hey, let me in! She crouched at those gates, shivering violently and soaked to her skin and in her brother's clothes, and then she finally began to question her own sanity. Don't you think you guys think that she might have at least examined her sanity while standing on the roof of that schoolhouse on multiple nights?
Right? I mean, hunched over the edge of the roof, vomiting onto the ground. I can't tell you how many times I paused mid-vomit to seriously question my life choices up to then.
Well, Eleanor cleverly anticipated the gates being locked, and decided to climb over the fence where the ground on her side was higher. The fence must have been built from knives and razor blades, though, because she was cut up and somehow injured her shoulder before finally climbing over and falling onto the muddy ground, knocking the wind out of herself.
And after several minutes of learning how to breathe again, she discovered that she'd somehow lost her bag in the fall. Wouldn't it just be on the ground next to her?
Right?
The narrator doesn't say that she fell onto a hillside or anything, or which would have caused the bag to maybe roll away, but she frantically felt around in the dark until she found the strap of her sack. So the writer killed that bit of non-drama while it was still in its crib.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And the narrator comments that the contents of the bag are soaked, though I don't think we should blame that on the fall. I mean, it's been pouring rain, and so Eleanor's relieved that her tools are still in there, and I'm thinking, including that knife that she wasn't sure she could use.
Yes.
Yes.
Eleanor checked her pocket watch. 9:05, the narrator tells us. Eleanor decided that she had 13 minutes before the wide-eyed woman would have her patrol. Dear listener, we all learned moments ago that the wide-eyed woman began her patrol every night at precisely 9 o'clock, but on Thursdays, she sometimes was delayed, possibly due to having to perform other duties. It was Thursday, so rather than showing up before 9 o'clock and waiting for the wide-eyed woman to start her patrol on time or late, Eleanor decided to gamble that this particular Thursday, the wide-eyed woman would start her patrol late. Am I right to say Eleanor, in spite of being purported to be as qualified to be a university professor, is as smart as a box of rocks? Or are university professors exactly this stupid?
Book smart and street dumb, as my granddad used to say.
Eleanor decided to avoid the front door. That was smart.
Yeah.
And circled around the building to find a 4-foot-high door at ground level, a cellar or coal chute perhaps, and noticed that this door was slightly ajar. Now, can anyone else see that gigantic piece of cheese sitting right there? Or is that just me?
Well, and the narrator says she decides that she has no choice but to go forward. I can think of several, most of which include getting the hell out of there.
Right? Yeah. While exploring the humongous basement of the asylum, the narrator describes a multitude of examination tables, each equipped with leather restraints and other apparatus, and it is now that we learn that her notebook was made of soap. Did either of you get that? I think the narrator meant soaked, but the transcription in the video said soap notebook.
Now, at this point, my mind, which is begging to be distracted, has forced me down a rabbit's hole of imagination. I took a real effort just to move on from that nugget. It is possible that the soap notebook, like in medical journals, they have a process of soap, SOAP.
Oh.
But that's stretching it.
Right.
Now I'm distracted because I'm thinking of a whole line of Etsy products that have never been heard of before.
We get a long description of smells and organic material as Eleanor documented what she was seeing with both words and illustrations.
So suddenly she's a scientist and a forensics expert. Did they say earlier what it was exactly that she taught at the school that she liked to stand on top of?
If they did, I don't remember it. She grew more horrified, and the more she documented and concluded that this wasn't medical treatment. This was, quote, systematic vivisection, unquote, performed while if the patients were still alive. She also discovered a storage area containing glass jars on shelves from floor to ceiling and containing body parts and internal organs.
Yeah.
So what is her end goal? If she's trying to get enough information to convince the authorities to investigate, I'd like to think she's got enough and could really get the hell out of there. And so, I think like getting back alive is probably better than sticking around, writing more stuff down in her soap notebook, and then ending the night by like drinking a shot of morphine where all of her observations would be lost. But, call me Debbie Downer.
Now, dear listener, this place had only recently opened in the beginning of spring. It was March 5th of that year. And this place already had a Costco-sized inventory of human body parts preserved in yellow liquid. Dr. Crow had been busy.
Idle hands.
And speaking of Dr. Crow.
Yep, and here the story turns into a James Bond movie. Dr. Crow, the white-eyed woman, and a man wearing a stained, bloodied butcher's apron descended into the cellar through a trapdoor on a ladder. They approach one of the examination tables, and Doc Crow begins to expostulate details, specifically for the listener's enlightenment. His soliloquy of exposition details everything he was doing at the asylum, his reasoning, and his intentions.
And actually, even a James Bond movie wouldn't behave this ham-handedly. This exposition dump for the doctor's own enlightenment, because neither of his companions seemed even slightly impressed or even aware that he was speaking at all.
For me, all that was missing is a purring cat in his arms as he talks.
Needs to be a white cat.
Yes, to match her white eyes.
Meanwhile, the wide-eyed woman is scanning the darkness around the cellar. At one point, Eleanor is afraid the other woman might have seen her, but relaxes again when the wide-eyed woman continues her scan.
Yeah, however, Eleanor apparently has utterly forgotten how vision works, and she was hiding behind one of the stone pillars that was supporting the ceiling of the cellar. So she was able to watch everything that the doctor and his two assistants were doing. That would mean she was at least, in part, not hiding at all if she could see them, or she was hiding and they couldn't see her.
Right? So,
of course, the white-eyed woman tells the doctor about Eleanor. How predictable was this? Are either of you surprised that a complete doofus was incapable of actually and eventually getting out of the trap that she walked herself into?
Well, I, for one, was shocked. Shocked, I tell you, just shocked.
So Eleanor is captured. She's strapped to a table, and Dr. Crow launches into a further expose, revealing that he knew who Eleanor was, who her brother was, and that he had known she was spying on them on the asylum every night. Then he turns into a Bond villain and describes exactly what he's planning to do to her and how he'll do it. I won't repeat it here because I'd be willing to bet our listeners could take over from here and they'd be able to give a 99% accurate, identical rendition of what Dr. Crow delivered. But it takes several minutes, and by the end of it, you are begging him to just get on with it, damn it.
It would have been easier if he'd just written it out ahead of time and just handed it to her to read to herself.
Well, we don't get to hear about him carving into Eleanor at this point. We only hear him describe what he plans to do.
Next, the narrator tells us about Millicent. Yes, the white-eyed woman finally gets a name. Picking up Eleanor, examination table and all, and carrying her upstairs.
What happened to the letter? Fuck us is what?
Yes.
We just change.
Yeah, it's fine. And up more stairs, down twisting hallways, around corners, and finally to a room with the number 14 on the door. Along the way, Eleanor is treated to views of other residents of the asylum, some in various stages of cranial dismemberment, and others with horrific malformations and disfigurements. There's constant screaming, pounding, scraping, laughing happening along the route. And then she's chained to a wall in an 8x8 room, which is plunged into complete darkness after Millicent leaves and locks the door.
You know, I have to say that she observes all these detailed images of the victims inside these rooms, and yet the narrator was clear that the doors had, quote, small barred windows set at eye level. So if you picture Eleanor being carried while strapped to a bed, moving past all these rooms, it's pretty hard to imagine her seeing anything in those rooms, much less observing scenes as detailed as the narrator wants us to imagine.
Well, maybe she was carrying the bed over her head.
Very slowly.
Yes. For the remainder of that night until the following morning, Eleanor is forced to stand with her arms spread apart in full darkness. She continues to hear screaming, laughing, scratching, but somehow finds sleep.
You know, maybe she worked at a summer camp once. You know, I did, and you'd be surprised by the noises you can eventually fall asleep to.
Yeah, indeed. The doctor has prescribed a specific feeding regimen involving a liquid diet of some sort of gray substance administered with a funnel. And Eleanor cooperates because she's been threatened with a nasal feeding tube if she fights.
Yeah, I've witnessed. I think I'd be willing to just let them use the funnel in that case.
Yes. On the third day, Eleanor was moved back into the cellar for the vivisection.
You know, I'm just wondering now, in a windowless room under such awful circumstances, Eleanor is able to track the time to know how many days have passed. You know, just a thought.
Mm-hmm. After injecting a paralyzing drug into Eleanor's neck, which doesn't interfere with her consciousness but renders her unable to move or even breathe, Doc Crow and his assistants insert a breathing tube.
Doc Crow spends another few minutes taunting Eleanor, of course, but before he can make his incision, the cavalry arrives.
But does it, though?
Well, it arrives in the form of one of the asylum's residents. Quote, the door of the cellar burst open with a crash that echoed through the underground space, and down the stairs came stumbling a boy who couldn't have been more than 14 years old.
Cue the crescendo of music, a la Raiders of the Lost Ark. Dun, da, dun, dun, da, dun.
He somehow managed to get his hands on a ring with dozens of keys on it, and he ran to the table where Eleanor is strapped down and began fumbling at her bonds.
Someone's in big trouble for leaving those damn keys lying around.
Millicent is there, but neither she nor Doc Crow do more than back away from the surgical table. The boy says through a malformed mouth, they're coming, we're all coming. You saved us.
What the actual fuck?
Right?
In what universe can anyone claim that Eleanor saved anyone?
Unless it was her plan all along to simply walk directly into a trap of her own making and get caught doing it. Brilliant.
Brilliant. At multiple points in this narrative, she could have done actual saving of people, but instead she made herself insanely conspicuous, bothered a bunch of old folks with probing questions about a traumatic experience, and finally walked alone directly into what she already feared to be an extremely horrifying building, and that only appeared fully constructed and operational on the top of a mountain a month or so ago.
Yep. After that confusing moment, more of the freed test subjects appeared in the basement and quickly dismembered Millicent. Eleanor listened to the woman's execution.
Because I'm guessing that Eleanor's still paralyzed and unable to breathe on her own, so she gets to be a passive witness to even more horrors.
Nice.
And we find out at this point that Duckrow had been breeding the subjects with close siblings, uncles, and parents, as if simply dissecting the brains of the individuals who had been placed in their care wasn't already enough villain dressing. The AI decided to throw in some incest and increase the ick factor.
Yep.
Because a family that slays together. No, never mind.
No.
After Millicent is reduced to a messy stain on the floor, the test subject confronts Duckrow with a soliloquy of exposition, and the AI author has forgotten a major detail set down at the beginning of this narrative. Thomas reveals that he'd been born in this building.
You mean the building that suddenly showed up on the mountain about a month ago?
That's the one.
Wait a minute. So Thomas would have to have been. Math is so hard.
The test subject who thanked Eleanor for saving them explains how his mother was 15 when she, quote, was forced to mate, unquote, with a man twice her age. He explains how he and his fellow test subjects had manufactured a communication system with which they planned their revenge and eventual escape.
Do we ever hear what this elaborate plan was that they took years to execute? Was it more than just getting hold of some keys and then killing Duckrow and Millicent?
And then the test subjects overpowered Duckrow and affixed him to one of the surgical tables with the same leather straps he'd used on the test subjects.
The listener is gifted with yet another long, detailed clinical assessment as other test subjects laid out surgical instruments and began cutting Duckrow's skull. Soon, one of them was slicing off parts of Duckrow's brain and asking him questions about his memory and perceptions. It's gruesome, of course, but rendered comical because the narrator drones on in an unemotional voice while the man is butchered by his own captives.
The narrator sounds thoroughly bored at this point. I mean, he could have just said blah, 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 surgical jargon, clinical speak, yada, yada, yada. You know, I feel your pain, narrator. I feel your pain.
And meanwhile, while this is happening, Eleanor is forced to watch the entire process from where she remained prone and unblinking while the medicine held her frozen.
After they finished carving up Duckrow's brain, they left the cellar and went upstairs and set fire to the building.
Awesome. Except, couldn't they have waited till Eleanor was no longer paralyzed so she could get the hell out of there on her own? I mean, Thomas had just told her that she'd save them. Remember? I mean, God, so much for gratitude.
Well, the test subject who'd untied Eleanor's restraints did return to the cellar to tell her that she should leave as soon as possible. What more did she need?
Because surely she couldn't have figured that out on her own.
He also reveals to Eleanor that he knew about her brother Thomas. So, small world, huh?
He also decides to take on the name of her brother because he couldn't remember his own. Isn't that sweet?
Oh, it warms my heart.
Then he leaves the cellar, abandoning a paralyzed woman who was only just now beginning to feel the medicine's effects begin to fade, while she could hear the sounds of chaos going on above her and smell the smoke which was beginning to fill the stone building.
See ya, wouldn't want to be ya.
Spoiler! Eleanor was able to escape the building before it became crumbling into rubble. She made her way down the mountain, naked and still somewhat under the effects of a very strong paralytic drug.
Well, there goes the PG-13 rating we could have had for the movie version.
Right. As happens so often in AI-authored videos, the narrator suffered a seizure and combined two sentences into one incomprehensible one. Quote, "She wrapped herself in a torn piece of fabric she found caught on a used, inadequate covering, but better than complete nudity." Unquote.
And we have our PG-13 rating after all.
Ta-da! There's still over 10 minutes remaining in this video, but I think it's best to just refer our listeners to the original video for the afterword.
Yes.
Good, because I was starting to feel a little paralyzed myself.
And that will wrap up the Forgotten Asylum, where children were bred again for research. And my question for you two is, if you wanted to target a specific subgroup in order to perform scientific experiments, what would be that subgroup? And what kind of experiments would you want to perform for the sake of science?
I would sequester a group of Orange County socialites on a deserted island for a year and force them to choose between rations of food or silicone and Botox injections.
The horror!
I'd choose for Floridian retirees, and my experiment would test their tolerance for constantly being proven wrong, and how much better about how much better life was when they were young.
And how about those uptight folks who believe whatever they're being fed through X and those other informational outlets about what's going on in the world right now? If you know, you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, we did it, guys. We finished the review. But I'm kind of sad about it, though. I don't know that we'll ever find a video this genuinely entertaining again. However, dear listeners, stay tuned for our next video. We will see if we can uncover yet another gem as we dig through the shit. I want to thank you, Warren, for being my best friend over 4 decades. And thank you, Nikki, for being patient while I continue to hold your horse hostage. Also, if our listeners would please leave a comment, like, and even subscribe, we might actually begin to get this channel seen by a wider audience. I'm Canny Bellingham, and may you all have a wonderful day.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao. See ya.